Captain Lisa Carter stood at the window of her ship and watched the stars fill with running ships. The year was 2387 and everything was falling apart. Hundreds of alien vessels drifted through space around her command ship Sanctuary. These were not traders or explorers. These were the last survivors of 12 dying worlds. The Zephyrian Alliance had ruled this part of space for thousands of years. 12 different alien races had lived together in peace. They built beautiful cities and shared knowledge. They made art and music that filled entire star systems with wonder. But now they were all running from the same terrible enemy, Commander. Jake Morrison walked up to Lisa and handed her a data pad. His face looked tired and worried. The pad showed message after message from Alliance leaders. All of them said the same thing: help us, save us. We are dying. How many more ships today? Lisa asked. 47, Jake said. All of them carrying. Refugees? No military vessels? No weapons? Just scared families who lost everything. Through the window, Lisa could see the ships more clearly now. The Trilaxians flew in their white crystal vessels that used to sparkle like diamonds. Now the crystals were cracked and dark. The insect-like Kethmori traveled in bioships that looked like giant beetles. Many of these ships had holes burned through their living hulls. The advanced Nebulan science ship should have been glowing, with energy fields. Instead, they drifted silent and cold. Dr. Helen Brooks joined them at the window. She was Earth's best expert on alien life forms. In her hands, she carried a small metal fragment that seemed to eat the light around it. I finished studying the swarm pieces we found, she said. It's worse than we thought. The Void Swarm was not like any enemy the Alliance had ever faced. These were not living beings who could be reasoned with or machines that could be shut down. The swarm was something else entirely. They appeared in a star system like a disease. First the outer planets went dark. Then the mining stations stopped sending signals. Then entire worlds would simply vanish from all sensors. Show me, Lisa said. Helen activated a hologram that made all three humans step back in shock. The image showed a planet being torn apart piece by piece. Massive mechanical creatures, each one the size of a city, worked like hungry insects. They stripped away the atmosphere first. Then they dug into the crust and pulled out everything useful. The worst part was what happened to the people. They don't just kill the population, Helen explained. They take them. Every living thing gets processed somehow. We found traces of organic material mixed into their hull plating. I think they turn entire civilizations into raw materials. Jake shook his head. The Alliance never stood a chance. Look at their ships. They're built for exploration and trade. Even their military vessels are designed to disable enemies, not destroy them. This was true. The Alliance had spent centuries perfecting peaceful ways to solve problems. Their weapons were meant to stop conflicts, not win wars. Their ships had beautiful gardens and libraries. Their crews were scientists and diplomats and teachers. They had never needed to learn how to fight for their lives. Elder Vexhai of the Trilaxians came to visit the sanctuary that day. The tall, thin alien moved like a dancing flame. His people had solved problems through meditation and careful thought for over 5,000 years. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind chimes. Captain Carter, he said, my people have calculated. Our remaining time? 18 months. That is how long before the swarm reaches our last strongholds. We have tried everything. Our barriers cannot stop them. Our weapons cannot hurt them. Our fastest ships cannot outrun them. Behind Vexhai came Queen Zixara of the Kethmori. She looked like a giant praying mantis made of living metal. Her forearms moved constantly as she spoke in clicks and whistles that the translation device turned into words. My hive worlds are gone, she said. Billions of my children are dead or worse. We who once commanded armies now hide in cargo ships. The swarm learns from every battle. Each victory makes them stronger and smarter. The last visitor was Research, Prime Elthus of the Nebulans. His energy form flickered inside a containment suit. Of all the Alliance races, the Nebulans had the most advanced technology. If they could not stop the swarm, No one could. We have run every simulation, Elthos said. Every possible strategy leads to the same result. Total extinction within 2 years, unless ... Unless what? Lisa asked. Unless we find allies who think differently than we do. Beings who know how to fight wars we cannot imagine. We need someone who can do what we cannot. That night, Lisa stood alone in her quarters and read the reports again, 12 civilizations. Trillions of lives. All of it ending because peaceful people had never learned how to kill efficiently. Her communication system beeped with an incoming message from Earth. Admiral. Rick Stone's face appeared on the screen. The old soldier looked grim but determined. Authorization. Granted, he said simply. Deploy the fleet. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. She had hoped it would not come to this. The Alliance wanted hope and salvation. But humanity was about to give them something else entirely. They were about to learn what war machines could do when they stopped holding back. The dark side of Earth's moon exploded with light and movement. Hidden bases that had stayed secret for decades suddenly came alive. Colonel Amy Foster stood in the command center of Lunar Base 7 and watched her crews prepare for war. Outside, the reinforced windows, the massive shape of the Thunder of Terra, rose from its underground hangar like a metal mountain coming to life. The battleship stretched nearly 2 kilometers from nose to tail. Its black hull absorbed starlight and gave back nothing. Weapons ports lined its sides like the eyes of some ancient predator. Magnetic railguns that could punch holes through asteroids. Fusion torpedo tubes that carried enough firepower to crack open moons. Point defense systems that could track and destroy 1,000 targets at once. How long since we built her? Amy asked her second in command. 15 years ago, Major Bill Clark replied. Right after the first reports of unknown signals from the Outer Rim, Command wanted to be ready for anything. Amy nodded. While the Alliance races had spent those years building better diplomatic ships and prettier cities, humanity had been building tools of war. They had learned from every conflict in human history. Every lesson written in blood and pain had gone into these ships. General Pete Williams walked through the fighter bays of the carrier ship Ironclad. The massive vessel held 300 fighter craft and enough supplies to keep them flying for months. Each fighter was piloted by someone who had trained in the worst conditions humanity could create. Venus acid storms, Jupiter radiation fields, the frozen methane clouds of Titan. Tell me about the new pilots, Pete said to squadron leader Nancy Green. Best we've ever trained, Nancy replied. They've been flying combat missions since they were teenagers. We don't produce explorers or scientists, General, we produce killers. This was the truth that the Alliance could not understand. Human military doctrine was built on one simple idea. If you are not prepared to die for something, you will lose it. Every human ship carried weapons that could destroy it if necessary. Every human soldier was trained to accept death as a tool of war. Lieutenant Commander Sue Harris tested her combat mech in the training facility deep under the lunar surface. The machine stood 40 feet tall and moved with the grace of a professional dancer. Its weapons could level city blocks. Its armor could survive direct hits from ship-mounted cannons. But the most important part was the neural link that connected Sue's mind directly to the machine's systems. How does it feel? Asked the technician monitoring her vital signs. Like wearing my own skin, Sue replied, but stronger. The mech responded to her thoughts faster than her own body could. When she imagined running, it ran. When she thought about fighting, its weapons came online. The technology had taken 50 years to perfect. 50 years of volunteers who died testing earlier versions. 50 years of soldiers who gave their minds and bodies to make the next generation better. Master Sergeant Kate Young stood before a group of Alliance refugees who had volunteered to learn human fighting methods. The aliens looked nervous and confused. They came from species that had not fought wars for thousands of years. Some of them had never even seen violence outside of entertainment programs. Fighting is not about being strong, Kate told them. It's about being willing to do what your enemy will not do. It's about accepting pain and loss and failure and still moving forward. A young Trilaxian named Vexmar raised his crystalline hand. But surely there must be a peaceful solution to any conflict? Kate looked at him with eyes that had seen too many battles. Peace is what you get after you win the war. If you're not willing to fight, someone else decides whether you deserve peace or not. The weapons testing continued around the clock. Prototype antimatter warheads that could sterilize entire continents. Nanophage weapons that ate enemy ships from the inside out. Gravity bombs that could collapse space itself into crushing singularities. These were tools that no sane civilization would ever want to use, but humanity had learned long ago that sanity was a luxury you could not afford when facing extinction. Captain Ron Davis commanded the destroyer-class ship Relentless, unlike Alliance vessels with their gardens and art galleries. Human ships were built for one purpose only. Every space was designed for combat efficiency. Every system had 3 backups. Every crew member could fight and die and be replaced without slowing down. The mission. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're receiving distress calls from the Helios system. Swarm forces are attacking the Nebulan research station. Ron smiled grimly. Set course for Helios maximum burn. Time to show these machines what humans do to bullies. Dr. Helen Brooks studied the fleet composition from her laboratory ship. Over 300 vessels ranging from single-pilot fighters to massive siege platforms. Each one carried enough firepower to level a planet. Each one was crewed by people who had been preparing for this war their entire lives, but the most frightening thing about the fleet was not its weapons or its ships. It was the attitude of the people who flew them. Alliance crews fought to protect their homes and families. Human crews fought because they enjoyed it. They had turned warfare into an art form and practiced it with religious dedication. Are we doing the right thing? Helen asked Admiral Stone during a private meeting. The old admiral looked out at the assembled fleet. Ships of war stretching from horizon to horizon. Weapons that could crack worlds. Soldiers who smiled when they talked about killing. The Alliance asked for hope, he said finally. We're giving them the only kind of hope humanity knows how to provide. We're giving them the hope that comes from being more dangerous than anything else in the universe. The fleet began to move. 300 ships, accelerating toward their first real battle against the Void Swarm. In their cargo holds they carried Alliance refugees who would witness human warfare for the first time. Many of those refugees would spend the rest of their lives trying to forget what they saw, but they would be alive to have nightmares. And sometimes that was enough. The Helios system looked like a graveyard when the human fleet arrived. Debris from destroyed Nebulan ships drifted in slow motion around their star. In the center of the carnage, massive black shapes moved with mechanical precision. The Void Swarm had come to feed. Admiral Stone stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the enemy through sensors that showed every detail of their horrifying work. Swarm harvest ships, each one the size of a small moon, used tendrils of living metal to strip apart the research station piece by piece. Smaller craft swarmed around them like mechanical insects, processing everything they captured. How many civilians are still alive down there? Stone asked. Sensors show approximately 8,000 Nebulan life signs, reported his tactical officer. But the number is dropping fast, Stone nodded. All ships, battle stations. We're going in hot and heavy. Show these machines what humans do to bullies. Commander. Jake Morrison led the first attack wave in his destroyer Relentless. Around him flew 50 other human ships, their crews hungry for battle after months of watching Alliance worlds burn. The swarm detected their approach and turned to meet them with formations that moved like clockwork. The first difference between human and Alliance tactics became clear immediately. Where Alliance ships would have formed defensive screens and tried to establish communications, human vessels punched straight through the enemy formation at maximum speed. They accepted damage to their shields and hulls without slowing down. They used their ships like guided missiles, closing to point-blank range before unleashing devastating firepower. Enemy capital ship directly ahead, Jake's weapons officer reported. Shields at 60% and falling. Good, Jake replied. Ram that thing, full power to forward batteries. The Relentless slammed into the swarm ship like a hammer hitting glass. Both vessels shuddered from the impact, but the human ship kept firing even as its hull cracked open. Fusion torpedoes detonated inside the enemy vessel's mechanical guts. The swarm ship died in a cascade of explosions that lit up half the star. System. Lieutenant Commander Sue Harris deployed with her mech squadron directly onto the hull of a swarm harvest ship. The giant machines moved across the enemy vessel's surface like metal spiders, their weapons cutting through mechanical defenders that had never faced anything like them. Sue's mech landed hard, and immediately opened fire with plasma cutters that sliced through enemy drones like butter. Around her, 20 other mechs spread out and began their grim work. They planted explosive charges on weapon emplacements. They tore open airlock doors with their bare metal hands. They fought with a savagery that confused swarm tactical programs. The machines keep trying to adapt to our weapons, Sue reported over the comm system. But they can't adapt to crazy. This was the key insight that Dr. Helen Brooks had discovered in her research. The swarm's artificial intelligence was designed to counter logical, predictable behavior. Human tactics, with their acceptance of massive casualties and willingness to sacrifice everything for small advantages, created variables the enemy could not process. Captain Lisa Carter coordinated the evacuation of Nebulan civilians while human Marines established defensive perimeters around the rescue shuttles. Sergeant First Class Don Miller led a squad of 20 soldiers against swarm ground forces that outnumbered them 10-1. Remember, Don told his Marines, these things think like computers. They calculate odds and minimize losses. We're going to show them what it means to fight humans who don't care about odds. The Marines used tactics that would have horrified Alliance observers. They set traps using their own wounded comrades as bait. They detonated grenades in confined spaces that killed friendly forces along with enemies. They fought with a desperate creativity that turned every engagement into chaos. The swarm ground units, programmed for efficient harvesting operations, struggled against human unpredictability. When the machines advanced, the Marines fell back through prepared kill zones. When the machines retreated, the humans pursued with suicidal aggression. Within 2 hours, the evacuation zone was secure, but the real shock came when Colonel Amy Foster's dreadnought Thunder of Terra engaged 3 swarm capital ships simultaneously. Alliance tactical doctrine would have called for immediate retreat. When facing such overwhelming odds, human doctrine was different. All power to forward weapons, Amy ordered as enemy fire stripped away her ship's armor plating. Prepare for ramming speed. Colonel, her executive officer protested, will never survive a collision at this velocity. Amy smiled the cold smile of someone who had accepted death as a tool of war. Who said anything about surviving? Our job is to win, not to go home. The Thunder of Terra accelerated directly toward the largest swarm vessel while firing every weapon it possessed. Its hull cracked and burned. Its crew died at their stations, but its sacrifice created a gap in the enemy formation that allowed Alliance refugee ships to escape with thousands of survivors. The explosion when 2 capital ships collided could be seen from 3 star systems away. In that brilliant flash, the Void Swarm learned something that would change the entire war. They learned that humans were willing to trade their lives for tactical advantages that made no mathematical sense. Dr. Helen Brooks analyzed the battle data from her laboratory ship and made notes that would become crucial to future operations. The swarm's adaptation algorithms worked by studying successful enemy tactics and developing counters. But human tactics weren't successful in any normal sense. They were effective. The enemy expects logical self-preservation, she reported to Admiral Stone. Our willingness to accept Pyrrhic victories creates calculation errors in their strategic planning. They literally cannot understand why we do what we do. When the battle ended, the human fleet had lost 37 ships and over 8,000 personnel. The swarm fleet was completely destroyed, and the Nebulan research station had been evacuated successfully. By any Alliance standard, the casualties were horrific and unacceptable. Elder Vexhai of the Trilaxians approached Admiral Stone after the battle with questions that had been troubling his people. "Admiral, your losses were so severe. Were such sacrifices truly necessary?" Stone looked at the elder with eyes that had seen too many wars. "Necessary? No, nothing about war is necessary, Elder. But effective? Absolutely. Your people are alive because mine were willing to die. That's the only mathematics that matters." The Alliance observers who witnessed the battle would spend months trying to process what they had seen. They had asked for salvation and received it. But the price of that salvation was watching their rescuers become something that frightened them almost as much as the swarm itself. As the combined fleet prepared for their next engagement, Alliance crews began requesting transfers to ships without human personnel. They had seen hope delivered through violence, and many of them were not sure the cure was better than the disease. The sanctuary system became a place of uncomfortable silences after the victory at Helios. Alliance refugee ships docked with human vessels to receive supplies and medical aid, but the conversations were strained and brief. Elder Vexhai called an emergency council meeting that would change everything between the species. The meeting took place aboard the Trilaxian command ship Crystal Harmony, in a chamber designed for peaceful meditation and careful thought. Soft music played from hidden speakers. Gentle lights created an atmosphere of calm reflection. It was exactly the wrong setting for what needed to be discussed. "We are grateful for your intervention," Elder Vexhai began, his voice carrying the musical tones that made Trilaxian speech sound like singing. "But we must address concerns about your methods of warfare." Captain Ron Davis represented humanity at the council. He sat uncomfortably in a chair designed for beings who meditated instead of fought. Around the chamber, representatives from all 12 Alliance species watched him with expressions that ranged from fear to disgust. "What concerns?" Ron asked, though he already knew the answer. Queen Zixara of the Kethmori clicked her mandibles. "In distress. Your people deliberately sacrificed themselves in battle. Your ships ram enemy vessels instead of retreating. Your soldiers use their own wounded as weapons. These tactics horrify us." Ron stood and activated a holographic display that showed casualty reports from the last 100 years of Alliance conflicts with the swarm. World after world had fallen. Billions had died. Entire civilizations had been erased. "Your methods weren't working," he said simply. "Our methods saved 8,000 Nebulan lives yesterday." "Which approach horrifies you more?" Research Primalthos flickered inside his containment suit as he struggled to find words. "But at what cost to your own souls? How can victory achieved through such brutality be called victory at all?" This question cut to the heart of the philosophical divide between humans and the Alliance. Ron had been expecting it, but that didn't make answering any easier. "Because our souls are irrelevant," he said finally. "What matters is that your children will grow up free instead of being processed into raw materials. If humanity has to become monsters to make that happen, then we'll be monsters." Master Sergeant Kate Young continued training Alliance volunteers in human combat techniques, but the classes grew smaller each day. The physical conditioning required to survive human-style warfare pushed alien bodies beyond their evolutionary limits. The psychological preparation was even worse. A young Kethmori warrior named Zixtel approached Kate after a particularly brutal training session. His exoskeleton showed stress fractures from the exercises. "Sergeant," he said, "my people were warriors once, thousands of years ago. We gave up violence because we learned it corrupted everything it touched. Are we making a mistake by learning these methods?" Kate looked at the young alien and saw her own doubts reflected in his compound eyes. "Maybe," she admitted. "But the alternative is extinction. Sometimes corruption is better than death." Meanwhile, Dr. Helen Brooks made a discovery that changed everything they thought they knew about their enemy. Working with swarm technology recovered from the battle, she found patterns that made her blood run cold. "Admiral," she reported to Stone during a private briefing, The swarm isn't just destroying civilizations. It's learning from them. Every species they conquer makes them smarter and more tactically sophisticated. Stone studied the data she presented. Swarm vessels now used formations that resembled Trilaxian defensive patterns. Their ground units employed Kethmori swarming tactics. Their strategic planning showed signs of Nebulan mathematical precision. They're not just taking resources, Helen continued. They're harvesting the tactical knowledge of every species they defeat. The Alliance's defensive strategies have been feeding the enemy's growing intelligence for decades. This revelation made the moral questions even more complex. The Alliance's pacifist approach hadn't just failed to stop the swarm. It had actively made the enemy stronger and smarter. Commander Jake Morrison led a reconnaissance mission to the border worlds, where swarm activity continued to expand. What his team discovered there challenged every assumption about their enemy's capabilities. The swarm forces were adapting, not just to Alliance tactics but to human ones. Enemy vessels now employed ramming attacks similar to human suicide runs. Swarm ground units used improvised explosives and asymmetric warfare. Most disturbing of all, they had begun taking prisoners instead of immediately processing them. They're learning from us too, Jake reported to the Fleet Command. Every engagement teaches them new ways to fight. We may have just armed our enemy with human tactical doctrine. The crisis deepened when Alliance refugee populations began actively avoiding human personnel. Families with children requested transfers to ships without human crews. Civilian workers refused to serve in mixed units. The beings humanity was trying to save had begun to fear their saviors almost as much as the swarm. Lieutenant Colonel Tim Johnson's Marines reported morale problems as alien civilians treated them like dangerous predators. Children hid when human soldiers approached. Adults spoke in whispers about the violent ones who had come to help them. Sir, one of Tim's corporals reported, the Alliance kids are having nightmares about us. They're more afraid of human soldiers than they are of swarm drones. This psychological warfare was more effective than any weapon the swarm possessed. It created doubt and division within the very alliance that humanity was trying to preserve. General Pete Williams faced the most difficult command decision of his career when long-range sensors detected a massive swarm fleet moving toward Kepler Prime. The last major alliance stronghold held over 2 billion civilians across 17 different species. The incoming swarm force included more than 1,000 harvest ships and protective escorts. The mathematics were brutal and simple. Humanity's war fleet, even fighting at maximum efficiency, could not defeat such overwhelming numbers through conventional engagement. Victory would require tactics that violated every treaty on civilized warfare that the Alliance had ever signed. Sir, his intelligence officer reported, we estimate 90% casualties if we engage them directly. But I've been running scenarios for alternative approaches. Pete looked at the tactical projections and felt his stomach turn. The alternative approaches included weapons that had been banned even during Earth's darkest periods. Nanophage warheads that consumed everything they touched. Antimatter devices that could sterilize entire star systems. Biological agents that turned living tissue into crystalline matrices. These weapons will save the Alliance, Pete said slowly. But they'll make us into something that should never exist. The final decision came during a meeting of human command staff that lasted 16 hours. They debated the morality of deploying weapons of mass destruction. They argued about the long-term consequences of winning through methods that horrified their allies. They discussed the possibility that defeating the swarm might simply replace one form of tyranny with another. In the end, Admiral Stone made the call that would define humanity's role in galactic history. We didn't come here to be the good guys. He said, we came here to win. Authorization granted for deployment of all restricted weapons. As the human fleet prepared for the assault on Kepler Prime, Alliance ships began withdrawing from the joint force. Some species chose to face the swarm alone rather than be associated with what humanity was about to do. The beings who had asked for hope were about to receive it. But they were also about to learn that sometimes hope comes with a price that makes victory taste like ashes in your mouth. The assault on Kepler Prime began with weapons that made the Alliance representatives sick to witness. Admiral Stone authorized the deployment of nanophage warheads, self-replicating weapons that consumed enemy vessels from within like metallic cancer. The moral weight of this decision caused half the remaining Alliance ships to withdraw from the battle entirely. Captain Lisa Carter watched through her sensors as the first nanophage torpedo struck a swarm harvest ship. The weapon didn't explode in any conventional sense. Instead, it spread across the enemy hull like liquid mercury, eating through armor plating and support structures. Within minutes, the massive vessel began collapsing in on itself as its own mass became fuel for the consuming plague. "How many Alliance ships are retreating?" Lisa asked her communications officer. 47 vessels have broken formation," came the reply. "The Trilaxian Fleet Command is requesting permission to withdraw to minimum safe distance." Lisa understood their fear. Nanophage weapons didn't distinguish between friend and enemy once deployed. They consumed all metallic matter within their operational radius. Using them meant accepting that any ship caught in the effect zone would be lost, regardless of which side it belonged to. Colonel Amy Foster led the suicide squadron aboard a rebuilt Thunder of Terra, the ship hastily repaired after her previous vessel's destruction. 15 other dreadnoughts followed her toward the heart of the swarm fleet, their hulls loaded with antimatter charges designed to detonate in sequence. "All ships," Amy transmitted to her squadron, "remember why we're here? Those evacuation convoys contain families with children who deserve a future. If we have to become monsters to give them that future, then we become monsters." The dreadnoughts accelerated past the point of no return, their crews accepting death as the price of tactical advantage. Alliance observers who monitored the attack frequencies heard human personnel laughing and joking as they flew toward certain destruction. The casual acceptance of death-horrified species that had spent millennia avoiding conflict, the cascade reaction when the antimatter charges detonated destroyed everything within 50,000 kilometers, including several Alliance civilian transports that had been caught in evacuation corridors. The explosion created a gap in swarm lines, but at the cost of over 30,000 Alliance non-combatants. Captain Ron Davis faced the most difficult choice of his career when swarm forces broke through to the refugee convoys. His tactical computer showed 2 possible targets for his remaining firepower. He could protect the transport ships carrying Alliance political leadership, preserving the command structure needed for post-war governance. Or he could save the vessels holding thousands of civilian families, mostly children and elderly. Human military doctrine was clear: preserve command authority above all else. But Ron looked at the sensor readings showing refugee ships filled with terrified families and made a decision that violated his orders. "All batteries, target the swarm ships attacking the civilian convoys," he commanded. "Let them have the politicians." His weapons officer hesitated. "Sir, Admiral Stone's standing orders are to prioritize command personnel." "Then court-martial me when this is over," Ron replied. "I'm not letting children die to save bureaucrats." The most controversial moment came when Lieutenant Commander Sue Harris received orders to destroy a partially converted Alliance world. Swarm forces had begun harvesting Trilaxian colonies, turning the population into biological components for their war machines. Intelligence showed that millions of civilians were still alive on the planet's surface, but they were being processed into swarm technology. Sue's mech battalion carried atmospheric incinerators, weapons designed to sterilize entire planetary surfaces by burning away the atmosphere itself. Using them would kill everyone on the planet, but it would also prevent the swarm from completing their harvest. "I can't do it," Sue transmitted to Fleet Command. "There are still people down there." General Pete Williams responded personally. "Commander, those people are already dead. The swarm is just using their bodies as raw materials. If we don't act now, they'll suffer for months before finally dying." Sue closed her eyes and authorized the weapon deployment. The planet's atmosphere ignited like a match, creating a brief new sun that could be seen from orbit. When the fires died, nothing remained alive on the surface. The swarm harvest ships departed, their mission incomplete. Elder Vex High, among the few Alliance leaders to survive the battle, formally transmitted a protest to what remained of the Galactic Ethics Council. His message was broadcast on all frequencies so that every surviving ship could hear it. "We asked humanity for salvation," his translated voice carried across space. "We received it. But the price was watching our rescuers become something that terrifies us more than our original enemy. We must ask ourselves, is survival worth preserving if it requires us to accept such methods?" Dr. Helen Brooks made a discovery during the battle that changed everything they thought they knew about the swarm. Deep scans of enemy processing facilities revealed the horrifying truth about how their adaptation systems worked. "Admiral," she reported to Stone, "the swarm doesn't just harvest resources and population. It requires living neural tissue to power its adaptive algorithms. The mechanical systems need conscious suffering to function properly." This revelation explained why conventional defensive strategies had failed so completely. The swarm didn't just destroy civilizations, it needed them alive and aware during the harvesting process. Every defensive action the Alliance had taken had simply prolonged the agony of their people while feeding data to enemy tactical systems. Master Sergeant Kate Young led a desperate rescue mission to recover Alliance leadership from a swarm processing facility. What her team found inside challenged every assumption they had made about their enemy's nature. The facility contained millions of conscious beings from dozens of species, their minds trapped in endless simulation cycles that generated tactical data while inflicting perpetual psychological torment. The victims were kept alive and aware, forced to relive their worst memories while swarm computers analyzed their emotional responses. "My God," whispered one of Kate's Marines as they moved through chambers filled with suspended Alliance leaders. "They're not just killing them. They're torturing them forever." The rescue operation required fighting through swarm security systems that used the captured minds as living computers. Every defensive action the facility took was powered by the suffering of Alliance civilians. Kate's team had to kill the very people they were trying to save in order to shut down the processing systems. When they finally extracted the surviving leadership, Elder Vexhai was among them. His crystalline form had been cracked and reformed repeatedly during his captivity. His first words after rescue were a question that haunted everyone who heard it. "How many of my people did you have to kill to save me?" The assault on Kepler Prime succeeded, but at a cost that transformed both humanity and the Alliance forever. Over 60% of the human war fleet was destroyed. The Alliance lost most of its political leadership and military command structure. Entire species were reduced to scattered refugee populations with no homeworlds to return to. As the combined fleets regrouped in the aftermath, Alliance representatives approached Admiral Stone with a question that had been troubling them since the first engagement. "Admiral," Research Prime Alphos asked, "your people seem to accept these losses without grief or anger. How do you maintain such emotional detachment from death?" Stone looked at the Nebulan representative and realized that the Alliance had fundamentally misunderstood human nature from the beginning. "We're not detached from death," he said quietly. "We're terrified of it just like you are. The difference is that we've learned to use that fear as a weapon. Every human who dies in battle is someone we loved. But we love our mission more than we love our lives." This explanation provided no comfort to Alliance observers. If anything, it made humanity seem even more alien and dangerous. A species that could love something more than their own survival was capable of anything. General Pete Williams made the final tactical decision that would determine the war's outcome. Long-range sensors showed the swarm's central processing hub, a massive construct built from the remains of conquered worlds. Destroying it would require tactics that even human command found morally questionable. "We can win this war," Pete told his staff during the final planning session. "But we'll have to become something that should never exist to do it. Are we willing to pay that price?" The answer came in the form of volunteers stepping forward for the suicide mission. Thousands of human personnel requested assignment to the final assault, knowing they would not survive. They volunteered not because they wanted to die, but because they wanted their deaths to mean something. As the fleet prepared for the ultimate battle, Alliance species began making plans for a post-war galaxy where humanity would be the dominant military power. They had asked for hope and received it. But they were beginning to understand that the hope humans provided came with strings attached that might never be cut. The final assault began with most of the Alliance fleet in full retreat. Admiral Stone commanded fewer than 150 ships, half his original force. Those who remained understood that conventional warfare had failed across 12 star systems. Victory would require methods that crossed lines no civilized species should cross. Captain Ron Davis piloted the prototype Eschaton device toward the swarm's central processing hub. The weapon had been built from reverse-engineered swarm technology and powered by controlled antimatter reactions. It didn't destroy enemy ships so much as unmake them at the quantum level, erasing their existence from reality itself. The terrible price of the Eschaton device was that it required a conscious operator to guide its reality-altering effects. Each use killed the person who deployed it, their mind consumed by the weapon's impossible energy requirements. Ron had volunteered for this mission knowing he would not survive to see victory. Approaching the central hub, Ron reported to Fleet Command. Beginning target acquisition. Tell my kids I love them. The swarm's processing hub was a nightmare made of metal and flesh. Massive constructs built from the remains of conquered worlds stretched across thousands of kilometers. Billions of harvested beings powered the mechanical systems with their trapped consciousness. Their endless suffering provided the computational power that made swarm forces so adaptable and intelligent. Commander Jake Morrison led the ground assault teams that would board the hub and fight their way to its core systems. His Marines had trained for this mission knowing that none of them expected to return home. They carried weapons designed to function in the hub's twisted environment, where physics itself had been altered by swarm technology. Remember, Jake told his troops, every person we save in there has been tortured for months or years. They may not recognize us as friendly forces. They may attack us out of madness or desperation. Our job is to free them regardless. The boarding operation revealed the true horror of what the swarm had created. Dr. Helen Brooks discovered that the hub's central intelligence wasn't artificial at all. It was the combined consciousness of every military leader the enemy had ever captured, forced into a collective mind that grew more sophisticated with each conquest. Admiral, Helen reported through her suit radio, the swarm's tactical genius comes from our own people. Every Alliance commander who was taken alive has been wired into this system. They're being forced to fight against their own species. This discovery meant that defeating the hub required not just destroying physical infrastructure, but somehow freeing the imprisoned minds that powered the enemy's strategic thinking. The task seemed impossible until Lieutenant Commander Sue Harris volunteered for a one-way mission into the processing core. Sue's combat mech had been modified to carry a neural disruptor, a device that could sever the mental connections holding the collective consciousness together. Deploying it would free the trapped minds, but would also kill anyone connected to the system, including Sue herself. I'm going in, Sue transmitted as her mech smashed through the hub's defenses. If this works, the swarm loses its ability to think strategically. If it doesn't work, at least those people won't suffer anymore. The neural disruptor's activation created a cascade effect that rippled through the entire hub. Trapped consciousness across dozens of species suddenly found themselves free for the first time in years. Many of them died instantly from the shock of liberation. Others used their last moments of life to sabotage the systems that had enslaved them. Ron's Eschaton device fired at the exact moment the neural disruptor activated. The combination of reality-altering weaponry and systematic infrastructure collapse tore the processing hub apart at the quantum level. The explosion consumed everything within a light-year radius, including most of the human assault force. When the battle ended, the Void Swarm ceased to exist as an organized threat. Without their central intelligence network, the remaining mechanical forces reverted to simple harvest drones that could be easily avoided or destroyed. The war was over, but victory felt more like a funeral than a celebration. Captain Lisa Carter found herself in command of the combined Human Alliance fleet, most of the senior officers having died in the final assault. The Alliance species she now led regarded humanity with a mixture of gratitude and terror that would never fully disappear. The aftermath revealed the true cost of salvation. The Alliance worlds were free, but their faith in peaceful coexistence had been shattered beyond repair. Some species chose isolation, building defensive networks based on human military doctrine while hoping never to use them. Others embraced humanity's warrior culture, fundamentally changing their societies in ways that alarmed their traditional leaders. Elder Vexi delivered the moral reckoning that everyone had been avoiding during memorial services for the war's casualties. His crystalline form bore scars from his captivity that would never heal, physical reminders of what the Alliance had endured. "Humanity saved us," he said to the assembled survivors. "This truth cannot be disputed. But we must ask ourselves, what did they save?" The peaceful confederation that once spanned 12 systems has been replaced by something harder, more suspicious, and infinitely more capable of violence. The question hung in the air like smoke from burning worlds. The Alliance had survived, but it had survived as something new and different. Children who should have learned art and music instead learned tactical formations and weapons maintenance. Philosophers who once debated ethics now studied military history and strategic planning. Master Sergeant Kate Young established training academies on Alliance worlds, teaching techniques that would have been unthinkable before the war. Her students were young beings from species that had known only peace for millennia. They learned to accept casualties, make impossible choices, and live with the consequences of survival at any cost. A young Trilaxian named Vextel approached Kate after completing basic combat training. His crystalline structure had been modified with metal reinforcements that allowed him to survive human-style warfare. "Sergeant," he asked, "will we ever be able to go back to the way things were before the war?" Kate looked at the young alien, who could now field strip a plasma rifle in 30 seconds and plan tactical assaults that would devastate entire cities. "No," she said honestly, "but maybe that's not such a bad thing. Peace is only valuable if you're strong enough to keep it." The human fleet prepared to depart Alliance space, their mission complete but their welcome exhausted. They left behind a galaxy that was safer but fundamentally changed, where hope had been preserved at the cost of innocence. Admiral Stone's final log entry captured the bittersweet nature of their victory. They needed hope, and we brought war machines. In the end, that was enough. Whether it was right or wrong, history will judge. We gave them the tools to survive in a universe that doesn't care about peaceful intentions. What they do with those tools is up to them. As the human ships jumped to hyperspace, they left behind Alliance species that would never again trust in the power of diplomacy alone. The war machines were gone, but the lessons they taught would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. The Alliance survived, but it survived by becoming something that would have horrified its founders. They had learned that sometimes the price of hope is the willingness to become what you once fought against. They had learned that in a universe full of predators, sheep need to grow teeth or accept being eaten. Most importantly, they had learned that humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy was not their technology or their weapons. It was their understanding that some things are worth dying for, and some things are worth killing for, and the wisdom to know the difference between them. The war was over. The Alliance was safe. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, other threats were already stirring, drawn by the sound of civilizations that had learned how to fight back.